Currently, we feature everything from news about the African American community, includes health, entertainment, education, sports, religious news, and business news. We cover the full gamut. Our newspapers impact the Arizona African American community and the community as a whole in numerous ways. First of all, we, as African American newspapers go, we do record Black history. So our newspaper is one of the only publications that records all the African American history throughout the entire state of Arizona. You know, anywhere from a wedding to a 100th birthday to a family reunion to business accomplishments to students' accomplishments. We do everything. So our newspaper is more or less not just a news beacon, but also a record keeper of African American history in the community. Currently, we're also one of the only newspapers in the state of Arizona who has a historical record of keeping not only African American issues and highlights, but also the Martin Luther King events, which Bernie Foster was one of our chief founders in helping us get that off the block when we started back in 1986. We were the only African state of Arizona. It's the only place where the actual Martin Luther King holiday was voted for by the community, whereas others were declared it the holiday itself.
But on Sunday mornings, my father would get the Michigan Chronicle, the Afro-American newspaper, and give us the kids to read them so we can in turn find articles that he could put in his newspaper. We've been in operation over 62 years. And basically the situation was established because we wanted to be the people's paper. We had a bourgeois paper, but we wanted to be the people's paper. And my father came up with some very innovative ideas as to how to do that. He would have a photographer go out and take pictures of people standing on the street corner and offer them a movie pass so they could recognize their picture in the paper the next week. So a little type of situations like that, or the lucky buck before the lotto came out, where he would take dollar bills and take the serial numbers off of them, put them in the paper, and go spin them in various restaurants and stuff, and got people interested in doing it.
Mr. Cornish was a minister. He was in fact preaching for the largest black congregation in New York City. Mr. Russ Worm had just recently become only the third African American to obtain a college degree, and he was quite erudite, and they were the editors.
You know, Freedom's Journal was the first, and these were two young men in their 20s who had good education, and there were people who came together and said, we have got to do something so that we can in fact be heard and have plead our own cause. We're tired of other people talking about what they think, we think. We want to say it for ourselves, and you can help us to do this. And Freedom's Journal was the result of that.
And I would say that I think the Atlanta Tribune, being a magazine, has an opportunity to do in-depth stories about business owners, their success, their failures, and how they can be role models for up-and-coming other business owners. We also feature a few corporate executives, but our feature on them is more how they can help through the supplier diversity program our business owners for goods and services. So our real target is the African American business owner.
Why do I do this? Well, it's quite simple. It's needed. We have newspapers, really we're more information providers as opposed to anything else. We aggregate content, and this particular area of the media business is, pretty interesting. It's very old. It's 180 years old. It's probably one of the original media plays, if you will, in America. And it's been the voice of black people for a very, very long time. Well, the one thing that we do in Houston, Texas has this thing called Juneteenth, which is when the slaves were freed based on the Emancipation Proclamation. And, it took a while to get the news down to Texas. Rumor has it that the crops couldn't be harvested if they allowed the slaves to be freed in January. So it took us about 6 months to, make it down and have it happen. We participate in community events in both Los Angeles and Houston, but we just kind of cover hard news. It's not a lot of fluff. We don't do the debutante stuff and all that. It's hard news. And every paper in the country that serves this market does things kind of their own way, but I guess the most compelling reason that we all kind of do it is that we feel the need to give a voice to our people.
My publication, we employ about 16 full-time employees, and we do what we call door-to-door circulation. 75% of our circulation is door-to-door, and we ABC ordered. So we do everything in this. Chicago got 1.5 million blacks, and we service maybe 1/3 of that population. We the largest black chain in the Midwest, and that's according to ABC.
We were founded in 1895 as a 2-page church newsletter and have evolved into a thriving, fabulous publication, winning a lot of national awards now, year after year. Very excited about the impact that we're making. Our goal is to continue to be educational, motivational, and of course to be an advocate for those in the community. I also serve in the Indiana House of Representatives in my 3rd term currently as a state legislator. And one of the things that I often talk about is the fact that I'm a publisher and a state legislator, and how much politicians hate media and how much media seems to hate politicians. And I do both, so sometimes I smack myself upside the head trying to do both. We are a newspaper that really focuses on positive, motivational news. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that we as African Americans know that we're doing great things in our community. We want to be able to build people up versus tear people down. And so we've been able to do that. And in the midst of doing that, we've been able to grow the newspaper over the last 9 years since I've taken it over, from a circulation of less than 2,000 to over 20,000 today of certified publication.
The mission for us is to make certain that people are informed about the other side of the story. Quite frankly, a lot of issues that affect the African community are a little different than it affects the major market community, so we try to at least let people know exactly what's taking place and how they're going to be affected. Our motto has always been honesty, integrity, and truth. So we want to make certain people realize that the information that we put in the paper is going to be accurate, is going to be correct, and is going to inform. Typically, as an organization, we have not been doing a whole lot with endorsements of candidates in political aspirations at this point, mainly because we wanted to focus our attention on informing the readers on what was taking place in the community, where a person stand, how they stood, and how they were perceived. We wanted to let people make their own informed decisions. So our posture has been a little different than some other papers in the marketplace.
And it wasn't until we got the 93rd Infantry Division, the 92nd Infantry Division, the 99th Pursuit Squadron of Aviators, Tuskegee, it wasn't until we got them into combat before we could get any satisfaction as far as democracy was concerned. And then the Courier hit on the idea of having black correspondents cover these troops, and the War Department said no way. But by persistence, they finally got 2 accredited. Of course, once we got out in the field, we had to combat the prejudice and discrimination from the top brass in the Army and Navy, because they didn't want any Negro reporters running around there uncovering discrimination and segregation. And we had to win them over. We also had to win over our own black troops. Our own black troops resented the black correspondent coming in, because papers like the Courier had advocated that some of these men must be placed in combat. See, we were the only American citizens that had to fight to get killed.
When the war ended, the black press was stronger than it had ever been. The 4 leading black newspapers were the Pittsburgh Courier, the Afro-American, the Chicago Defender, and the Amsterdam News. The combined circulation of more than 100 black publications was in excess of 2 million copies a week, very nearly a 100% increase from just a decade before.
When I became publisher, there were probably only about 5 women publishers. Today, in 2007, we have at least 40 to 50 women publishers. And what is really unusual about all of this is the fact that usually, just as I how you became a publisher and you were a woman was because of being a widow. Now we have young women who are starting their own publications. We see fathers passing on their publications to daughters and that kind of thing. So it's a lot different in 2007 than when I started in 1968. I had an opportunity to lead a delegation to Nigeria in 1995 as a first. About 19 publishers joined me on that trip, where we had a first-hand opportunity to see things in Nigeria in 1995. In addition, we did a number of projects that we are extremely proud of. We were in the top leadership, participating in the Black Leadership Forum with other national chairmen and presidents when they had the Texaco crisis. I was one of those publishers representing NNPA to go to Texaco to discuss the unfortunate remarks made by some employees of Texaco, which they eventually apologized for. And I have now I am chairman of the NNPA Foundation, the philanthropic arm for our organization. We have some tremendous projects underway. We're looking at converting our home or our house, which was our office in Washington, D.C., into a historic museum for the Black press. We've also been invited by Howard University to have an NNPA wing at the John H. Johnson School of Communications there at Howard University, and we are extremely excited about that. And if we need to go back and just talk about things locally, none of this could be possible without the support of your local base. And certainly the Crusader has enjoyed that and continues to enjoy that over 67 years in Chicago and 46 years in Gary, Indiana.
There are a number of ways of gauging the impact. One is when you affect change, when legislation, for example, in Houston, we had the affirmative action challenge. And as a result, Houston was one of the few cities, actually the only city in the nation that was able to maintain and to win from the standpoint of keeping affirmative action in place. I believe that a strategic partner in accomplishing that goal was the Houston Defender and the Black press, but primarily the Defender because we are more news-oriented publications where our other counterparts are more entertainment-oriented. I think that newspapers, particularly the Defender, has played a role in reporting the social record. If you look at papers, if 20 years from now our children go back and try to figure out what was life like in Houston or in any major city, their assumption would be, based on what they read in the daily papers, is that there were a very small number of African Americans who lived in the city, when in reality, in a city like Houston, there are over 500,000 African Americans, which is equivalent to the sizes of major cities like Atlanta and Pittsburgh. So from that standpoint of view, I think the African American newspapers play a strategic role in making sure that people understand and know that Black people do exist in this nation.
The call was heard, and several thousand Black Americans fled the South during and after World War I for the industrial centers of Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. It was the largest movement of people in the history of the nation. Robert Abbott's weekly newspaper, the Chicago Defender, was largely responsible for the Great Northern Drive. The influence of African American pioneers in journalism is particularly evident in the years 1910 to 54. Such stalwarts as Robert Abbott, who remained at the helm of the Chicago Defender for decades, P.B. Young in Norfolk, John and Carl Murphy in Baltimore, and Robert L. Vann in Pittsburgh exemplified the era.
I really can't imagine African Americans making it psychologically and spiritually without the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh Courier. Now, there are also, further east, other newspapers of prominence, like the Afro-American from Baltimore. In New York, you had the New York Amsterdam News, and years later, Adam Clayton Powell, the congressman, started his newspaper called the People's Voice. And in Texas, I think you had the Houston Informer. But the Black press was something that you just couldn't exist without if you were an educated person, or if you could read and write. And if you didn't read and write, you'd want somebody else to read it to you. Like when my grandfather used to come and visit my home when we were little boys. My grandfather used to make my older brother read the entire Chicago Defender, including advertisements. The advertisements, he had to even read those over and over. Then he'd come back and make him say, read that again for me.
The success of the Abbott age of black newspapers was due in part to increasing literacy among African Americans. The newly literate race hungered to see themselves reflected in publications. Robert Abbott modeled his front page on the style used by William Randolph Hearst. Abbott said, "We were the first Negro paper to use large headlines. Nearly all of the other papers called our paper the Yellow Journal when we first began using these up-to-date practices and methods. Competition brought imitators, and soon Abbott found that he did not have the field to himself." The Defender's longtime rival was Robert L. Vann's Pittsburgh Courier, first issued January 15, 1910. Promoted as America's best weekly, the Courier vied with the Defender, whose motto was world's greatest weekly, as the national newspaper.
My name is Frank Bolden, and I worked for the Courier beginning in the year 1936 as a stringer. Mr. Vann, who headed the Courier at that time, believed in a minority press having a campaign. We must keep in mind that the minority press at that time was the only voice that black people had in America. Their news was rarely carried in the white press. Their achievements weren't carried. Their pathology was carried whenever they misbehaved or something of that nature. But in order to achieve first-class citizenship, you had to have a voice, and the Courier brought hope to black people, and also it was their advocate. It did all the fighting for them. It fought for fair housing. It fought to get Negroes in the military service other than service jobs. And I was part of all of those campaigns, and I know what it took. We had to have patience. We had to keep fighting.
We co-sponsor one of the Black Pride Parade, which we have every year. They're in their 18th year. That happens in the fall. So it's usually a pretty big deal. It's not quite like the Bud Billiken of the Tribune, but it's pretty big. We also co-sponsor Negro League Night at the minor league baseball team, and coming up to that, we promote a lot of Little League baseball for minority children so they can get involved in baseball and some golf and some of the other things that go on in athletics that kids really don't have an outlet for any longer. The schools don't have a lot of athletics there, so we try to promote some of those things with promote the sponsorship we do with the Negro League, with the minor league team. We have a health initiative we do each year, and one of the things that's real important that we want to focus on, which we're working on now as a matter of fact, is obesity, which is really, really prevalent across the country, but in particular in our community. So we have partnered with local hospitals, local health care providers to promote this. In terms of other things we're doing, well, as a community newspaper, we cover the news that pertains to the African American, the news that is going to give them more encouragement to do the things they need to do in their communities, and give them information about things that they might want to consider doing, just things they won't get anywhere else.
One of the greatest contributions of the African American press, the black press, was the coverage of blacks in sports. The black press gave constant weekly accounts, sometimes in details, about the stars of the Negro Leagues. Thanks to the black newspapers, we could keep up with the Pittsburgh Crawfords, the Cleveland Buckeyes, the Kansas City Monarchs, all the great players, the great names, where they were playing next, smaller communities they may be visiting, to do exhibition-type games. And so consequently, if you were going to be coming near my hometown, we would be ready to be there just to see you. Satchel Paige was a hero long before the white press discovered him. the black newspapers carried weekly accounts of the batting averages, the RBI averages, every week of the black major league teams. When it came to baseball, along with black college football and blacks who played football on major white college teams, the few, we would have never heard of many of them had it not been for the black newspapers. Now, Jesse Owens made history now and then in the white newspapers, but in the black newspapers, we knew what his mother looked like. We knew about his girlfriend, whom he married. We knew about his buddies. This is why a lot of us kids and little boys down south used to try to fix our hair like the black stars in the north. We were not imitating white people. We were imitating black people. Always, black heroism was paraded before you.
We focus on community news. We like to report the achievements of African Americans, but as a newspaper, we also have to report the unfortunate incidents such as black-on-black crime, drive-by shootings, and the disparities in City Hall as well as in the city and state of Mississippi. Our circulation is throughout the state of Mississippi, as well as we have a great national circulation. We have those that are from Mississippi that would like to keep up with what's going on in our state. And we have a wide variety of people who actually subscribe throughout the nation. The Mississippi Link focuses on what's going on in the community, but what's important to our advertisers is we have a growing number of blacks that have much higher income than in the past. And this target population is an area that advertisers should be focusing on.
I've been in the newspaper business about 35 years, in fact, all of my adult life. I'm a journalist by training, a former reporter for the daily newspaper in St. Paul, the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And I discovered at a young age that I have both an ability, a desire, I have a gift, and the gift is the gift of communication, of listening intently and then presenting what I have heard in ways that people who hear the reports feel that it is accurate, it is true, and it is reliable. That, in fact, then is the mission of our newspaper, Insight News. We call it the 3 I's. We want to inform, to instruct, and to inspire. Information is critical. People need information. Beyond information, they need instruction. What do you do with the information, the news that you get? And finally, how do you inspire people to act on the information, on the idea, and on the opportunity? We see that as our critical role. And we try to get people to act by showing our people in action. At the end of the day, we believe that our mission is to help our people see our way to a future that is brighter, that is bigger, that's productive, that's creative, and that reflects our sense of sovereignty and our capacity to serve ourselves and serve humanity. Our newspaper is a great newspaper. The work we do is great work, and we're pleased to be part of NNPA.
We had our heroes who meant a lot to black people in America, and later to white people too, but one of the best that kept us going when times were tough was the rise of Joe Louis to become heavyweight champion of the world. Whenever he fought, everybody dropped whatever they were doing. If you were dining, if you were working, or if you were sleeping, you'd wake up so you could hear Joe Louis. Joe Louis brought hope to us, brought pride back to us, and he offset the damage done by the Hollywood stereotype.
We couldn't wait. We couldn't wait to get the Chicago Defender during the great Joe Louis era, or the Pittsburgh Courier, because there would be whole pages of the great fights. When Joe Louis fought, we rarely saw pictures of Joe Louis in the white papers, because he represented a threat. You see, the white newspapers might show a headshot, a little picture. Now, we're talking about the majority of us were living down south at this time. We didn't have access to the northern publications that might have been a little more liberal. But down south, they did not dramatize that. When Joe Louis won the world's heavyweight championship by knocking out Jimmy Braddock in Chicago, they just ran a little simple half-column headshot of him in the paper. But we couldn't wait.
My name's Tom Watkins. I publish the Daily Challenge in Brooklyn, New York. I publish the New York New American, and I publish the Afro Times. I've been in publishing weekly since 1953, and I've been publishing daily since 1972. We've managed to survive financially and thrive and help many, many people. And why I'm there. Why I do it is because my father. It's a historic thing. I never would have chosen to be in publishing. I would have been off doing other things, playing ball, making motion pictures, digging for oil, looking for other things and trying to help other people. There are a lot of things I think that are still yet to be done that I could have gotten done as president that are being done now and look off to be the future of the organization. I don't know where the organization is headed in the situation. There's so many different things now. There's so many different activities. There's so many things that the Black America expects that we haven't moved forward with. We're still basically a one-day-a-week newspaper group. And where it is now, you got to be more critical, you've got to be more responsive to your people than one day a week. That's all it is to it. So we aren't doing what we really have to do. I mean, we're doing basically what John Worsworm did in 1827. And we haven't changed it, and it's 2007 now, and we need to be about doing more.
The newspaper started in 1928, and we've published every week since then. I've been involved in the newspaper about 20 years. I've been the publisher about a dozen years, and when I took over as publisher, we were publishing about 6,000 papers a week, and now we're publishing 70,000 papers a week. And we are in about 40% of Black households in the St. Louis metropolitan area, and we reach about 200,000 readers. We also have a website that has about 80,000 unique visitors a month. So we are very anxiously looking forward to the increased opportunities available in the digital age. So while we before published once a week, now we're able to speak to our audience, provide information for our audience, interact with our audience 24/7. That's very exciting at The American.
It seems to me that every American can take pride in the fact that the Negro Newspaper Publishers Association is meeting this week to discuss the wartime problems of the Negro press. The Negro press has problems aplenty in peacetime. In wartime, they are multiplied. I know how willingly and earnestly the publishers of these papers have worked at the job of serving their country and their readers since the war began.
Tribune is America's oldest newspaper serving the African American community in the United States. We've been publishing for 123 years. And for every holiday, every opportunity that we can communicate on issues that are important to the African American community in Philadelphia, we're there to respond to that. We articulate the life, the everyday experiences that African Americans face. The Philadelphia Tribune is there to record that. We provide information and news that we believe reflects that experience. It's their lifestyle, it's their history, their everyday opportunities where we reflect that experience. Well, I've been coming to the NNPA conventions for 37 years, and I have never come to a convention where I didn't learn something. I think coming together with publishers and peers not only is informative, but the communication that was created as a result of these meetings on what we're doing, things that work, things that don't work, things that will make us better at what we do in publishing our newspapers, is an important opportunity for me.
My name is Jim Washington. I publish and own the Dallas Weekly newspaper in the great state of Texas, in the great city of Dallas. We've been doing this for about 51 years. I'm a second generation owner, not that he was my father or anything, but I basically bought the paper from its founder, one Tony Davis, in 1985. and had partners then. So in 1989, I took it over by myself. And we've been going ever since. We're a weekly publication. Our circulation is 17,000, and that's down from a high of 25,000. That's the nature of the marketplace that we live in. However, we're doing some pretty interesting things with our website and our electronic edition. So we found a new business model, if you will, that seems to be working for us in terms of how we distribute our product. It allows us to video stream, it allows us to audio stream, and those kind of things. So we're really taking advantage of technology in that regard. We are an institution in our market. I guess you'd say one of the big things that I'm proud of is that we're three-time winner of the A. Philip Randolph Award, which is what we would call our Black Pulitzer, if you will. The marketplace right now, it's just not African American owned newspapers. The issue of print and how people receive and disseminate information is so changing and so dynamic when you think about YouTube and MySpace. So you have to keep pace. So I don't consider myself to be in the newspaper business. I'm in the communications business. So we just want to what we think we're doing is remanufacturing the information and distributing it differently. And as long as we can keep pace with that, we'll be okay.
The Richmond Free Press stresses excellence, believing that excellence is one of the most powerful instruments in the movement for change. It has given voice to the voiceless, and it has competed with the daily newspaper in many instances, and not only competed, but we have given balance in terms of opinion. The competition is a tremendously conservative publication that has opposed all progressive movements, including the civil rights movement, including Dr. Martin Luther King, including Thurgood Marshall. The Free Press, on the other hand, is a progressive newspaper which is committed to righting wrongs. The Free Press is committed to making a better Richmond and a better state for all people and all of Virginia's citizens. It is very important that there is an independent voice like the Free Press in Richmond when you consider the merger of newspapers with a few people controlling ideas. The Free Press believes that people cannot be free unless they have the opportunity for free expression. We provide that opportunity not only for the Black community, but the entire community. Because of this greater marketplace of ideas, we think that Richmond is a freer place, it is a better place, and it is a place that through education has broken away from its reputation of being the former capital of the Confederacy.
African American news wasn't as prominent in daily newspapers. Only the great people like Sammy Davis Jr., Lena Horne, or Duke Ellington, and those people were carried in the other newspapers. So there was a need to help solidify the pride of African Americans and to note their achievements.
The heyday of the black newspaper was really during the era, ironically, the era of segregation, in particular in the 20th century, up through the 1930s into the 1940s. And of course, the reason for that was that during that particular period, there was no black writers working on white newspapers. And most of the white newspapers, their coverage of the black community was superficial at best, if at all. The black papers were able to promote their own cultural events, their own commercial products, and basically were able to distribute the publication to larger urban black communities that were interested in that type of information.
The
Columbus Times goes back to the late 1930s that we found out in doing research, and our family is the ones that now carry on the newspaper. And we found out that in the daily media and also in the electronic media, that's television primarily, they don't always tell the good stories about African Americans and blacks. So that's why we are dedicated to printing the Columbus Times on a weekly basis. And we also started a magazine called The Black Experience. We found out in our city that there was nothing in writing about the black experience. And we have some great people that have come from Columbus, Georgia, such as Mr. Sam Mitchell. He's the NBA Coach of the Year of the Toronto Raptors. And also we are the home of Ma Rainey. She's the mother of the blues. Louis Armstrong was in her band, as well as Bessie Mae Smith. So these are just two famous people that have their roots in Columbus, Georgia, and nothing was in writing. So we started the Black Experience magazine. We're going to keep that going because the African Americans and blacks has certainly contributed a lot to the city, the state, the country, and the world. And we want to make sure this story is always told.
And we've been in business since 1973, just celebrated our 34th anniversary. We started the Villager in Austin as what we call a good news newspaper to tell the positive experiences and record the positive experiences of the black community. And so that's been our focus, and we cover all types of news, political, social, educational, and youth, sports, whatever. And as a member of the NNPA, we are trying to keep a historical background of the African American community, and also through our association trying to find ways to improve our newspapers and also be a national voice for the black community. Well, in our city, we feel that we have provided a voice for our community. We've been there to speak out on issues and give some focus to the issues that are important to our community. And we've come from the days of almost pure segregation to where we are now. And right now is trying to keep the community engaged, number one, and also talk about the issues that are important to us. Every issue affects everybody, but it affects some communities more than others. And we think that what we've done is been able to have a connectivity of the African American community to the broader community.
When Cornish and Rushform founded Freedom's Journal in 1827, they found it an instrument that we have used constantly in the depiction of coverage here in the state capital of California. When we applied for credentials, they denied us credentials. The press corps did. When we went back and made our statement to the main body, our principal argument was almost the argument that Samuel Cornish and John Rushform had as they founded Freedom's Journal, is that we want to plead our own cause and that we want to serve this community. No other voices are being heard. Sure enough, the full body saw fit to ultimately grant us credentials. So we're very close. We feel very close to that cause, the cause of the founding of the black press, as these two gentlemen, Rushform and Reverend Cornish, the spirit in which they started the black press.
Most of the black publications started for reasons that the whites didn't. They were not money makers. They were advocacy publications. I came to Chicago as an advocacy journalist, not just to be a journalist. My idea was to do something for the people, for the cause, to help elevate the Negro race, as it were. And I must tell you, I think I have an internal image of myself as an extension of the first black newspaper. I think it is important that I become well informed and that I interpret black life and not rely on other people. In other words, we must interpret ourselves, define ourselves, our images, and look at the world through our lenses and then project it out. Why should other people do it? And I think it goes back to the fact that the first black newspaper ever published, Freedom's Journal, March the 16th, 1827, had its lead editorial, its masthead actually, "No longer shall others speak for us."
I guess I'll get the papers and go home like I've been doing ever since we've been apart. I get some consolation when I read of someone else's lonely heart. I wonder if you get the papers too, and if you feel as melancholy as I do, until you're in my arms again, never more to roam. I guess I'll get the papers and go home.